Hello, and welcome to Course 5 Compass Live. I'm David McBride from Course 5 Intelligence, coming to you from my home in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm excited to be joined today by my friend and colleague in the analytics industry, Lynn Lanphier. Hi, Lynn.
Good morning. Good to see
you.
you.
Thanks for taking the time to be with me today.
Thank you for having me on.
Let me introduce our audience to you, Lynn. Lynn has a great balance of strategic and tactical when it comes to analytics. She spent several years leading the analytics function, pardon me, at Best Buy, and has had additional analytics leadership roles, including one recently at US Bank. She has spoken at many conferences where she and I first got to know each other and through various Digital Analytics Association events. I saw you speak at a Forrester event in Austin about a year and 3 or 4 months ago. And I think at that point it had been a little while since I'd seen you. I walked in the room and saw you on the stage, and it was just like, I felt like I was with friends. I think back to many conversations we've had at the DA Hub or the Exchange conference before that. We now serve together on the Digital Analytics Association Board of Directors. And for me, it's a great pleasure to welcome a friend to Course 5 Compass Live. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. It is a great pleasure to be amongst friends here and have a conversation. So thank you.
We're joining each other today from different parts of the United States. As I mentioned, I'm in the Bay Area, and you're in Minneapolis. How are things in Minneapolis today?
For February, it's decent, although this weekend it's supposed to get to below zero, so typical weather in Minnesota.
Well, I guess that's pretty much what you expect when you live in Minneapolis, right?
This is true. This is true.
We're going to talk today about building and leading an analytics capability. And I want to start by talking about what that means. Or when we talk about analytics capabilities and how do you optimize an analytics capability, is it people, process, and technology? That's the common framework that we talk about. Is it more than that, or is that the building block? How do you look at this concept relative to people, process, and technology?
Yeah, the way I think about it is definitely people, process, and technology are the foundation when you think about analytics and data and the consumption and use of it. It involves all three of those. And I like to think about it in the terms of connections. And so it's connecting the data to the business outcome, connecting the data to the work streams and efforts. And so it's really connecting all that you have together. It's connecting the people. So from my perspective, understanding the business stakeholders' needs and connecting the analysts or the developers to what's required is an important element of that. And then lastly, it's connecting the technology. And that's never been more important than recently with the proliferation of tools that we're using, whether it's the marketing platforms and MarTech and AdTech, down to the analytics platforms, and then obviously into the operations and the other platforms. And I was speaking specifically from the digital side of things, but it goes, it holds true for any type of analytics. At the end of the day, it's about the data you're collecting, how you're using that data to drive business value.
The connection aspect there is one that we don't often talk about. I think it's either implied or unsaid, and maybe things that are left unsaid sometimes don't get much attention. So the idea of having this framework, people, process, technology, but not letting them live in silos, and emphasizing, not just acknowledging, but emphasizing the connectedness that is required to make them work, to drive business outcomes, I think is really powerful. I like that. Yeah.
And I miss talking about process. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to have processes in place to make all of those connections happen. And so again, you're right. It's something that we don't typically talk about in that vein. But I think, again, for me, it's all about the connections and making
process is an interesting topic in that sometimes we talk about data governance, and often that's kind of the process side of things, or team governance. Are you going to be decentralized, or are you going to operate hub and spoke, or who's going to have responsibility, and what's the escalation metrics or matrix? These are really, for me, interesting because they're all about getting people together. When I think about governance and process, and whether you are actively doing that or sort of everyone's sort of assuming what they think is the right way to, what they think the definition of an important metric is. There is a governance process. There is a process. It's better to be, I guess, specific about it and upfront about it than just let things live in people's heads.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, a lot of people, a lot of leaders don't necessarily, business leaders in particular, don't necessarily want to talk about the process and governance aspect of it, because they see, and sometimes it can be a derailer of the actual action. They want action, right?
Right.
And they don't want to focus on those, or want to minimize the focus on that and focus on what we can do with the data to drive growth or reduce costs or improve the experience. But it's a critically important aspect of it when you talk about the governance, as you were mentioning there, is that without quality data, everything else falls apart. You're going to make wrong decisions, or you're not going to optimize to the level that you need to. And so that aspect of it is critically important. And I'm starting to see more and more talk about that, especially, over the last year with the pandemic and the focus on digital transformation and analytics becoming more critical to that you're seeing a lot more of that activity and focus on roles, dedicated leadership roles, right? Dedicated to governance, process automation, being able to leverage the technology for what it should be doing so that then analysts can get back to actually providing the business value.
I guess that's part of what the leader's role is to go out and clear that space with the stakeholder, with the executive team. The analytics leader should come in and say, yes, we are going to get you the results that you need to run your business. While we do that, we also need to carve out space and time, because it does take time to align on some of these core topics of getting the data right, so that you can trust the information, so that you can make reasonable information or decisions with your business or with the data. I want to encourage our audience to include or add any questions or comments that they have into the question box, whether you're joining us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. Feel free to answer or ask a question, and we'll do our best to respond to it. So, Lynn, as you think about your career and getting started, what are some lessons that you've learned in I guess establishing this kind of capability, or maybe reinvigorating one if you've already established it and now you're in the next phase?
Yeah, and I have a couple examples of that at both Best Buy and US Bank. I was building and leading the digital analytics capability. And on one hand, with Best Buy, it grew organically. And we started small by addressing the data aspect of it first, right? Making sure that we had the tools, the people, and the processes in place to collect the data. And then we added more of the skill sets required for the reporting and the automation of reporting, so we can enable self-service. And then we had the analysts who were doing the business analysis and extracting the value out of the data. But by kind of putting those building blocks in place, we were able to create the credibility, or develop the credibility with the business teams, by not trying to solve everything, but being really focused on what we were going to deliver, and then building upon that as you gained the the credibility, the trust, and in many cases the interest of the business, that they wanted more. So then we could build and add more resources to support that. Similar with US Bank, when I came in to build a team, I acquired some people who had the domain expertise, which was awesome because they understood banking and the data, which is something I didn't have experience with in this case. So learning from those
regulated environment with some very different data sets, right?
Exactly. But they didn't have the digital experience, right? So bringing in I was able to add value by bringing in that place. And we started with an assessment of the implementation of our Adobe Analytics and cleaned that up, because if you didn't have somebody there caring and nurturing that, right, it can fall apart quickly because of the speed of which digital is changing and new experiences are being created. So again, establishing that foundation of quality data and then building and developing. So very similar path to that, but not trying to everybody over the last few years, data scientists, that's been a big push to include more advanced analytics, data science. But if you don't have the foundation built, again, those efforts of bringing in some very highly paid, qualified, advanced resources, one, you're going to frustrate them because the data, they're going to spend more time cleaning data and trying to find data versus actually, doing the modeling and testing and experimentation. And so you've got to have that foundation before you can build the end state, but you got to be able to, have your steps in place to get there. You got to know where you want to go. And so I've always said it, start small, but dream big, and know where you're going, but also build in a way that you're flexible enough to change, because not only is, your business changing and evolving, your consumer is changing and evolving, the technology is actually, changing at a faster pace than we can keep up with, whether it's the analytics technology, the marketing, ad serving, whatever it may be. Things are changing faster than you can build towards from a capability standpoint. So again, being nimble and flexible in what your product you're delivering from an analytics standpoint is key to this, and being really focused and being able to prioritize the work coming in.
I think back on a lot of what you're saying resonates with me in my experience. There have been times where I felt like I was like the company I was working for had invested a lot of money in tools and people, and I felt this pressure to deliver something right away. Because they had invested this money, they need an ROI, and they want an ROI right away. I'm a marketing investment, and I think that I didn't necessarily give myself the space in that initial experience to sort of be methodical about it, and I think I put a lot more pressure on me and on my team. Thinking that we did have to solve everything right away, instead of saying, okay, here's the order in which we're going to do this, and it is going to take us some time. And then later on, once I recognized that this wasn't all going to work, I started to think, okay, where can I turn to for, I guess, encouragement or inspiration, not just for ideas, but I realized that I needed some support from others who had been through a similar experience. And that's where I found a lot of comfort in being involved with industry associations like the DAA, or attending various conferences. For me, that was instrumental in sort of giving me the confidence to, we can do this. Everybody's dealing with similar problems, and let's support each other. Any interactions or ways that you've found support to get you through sort of the difficult phase of establishing these capabilities?
Yeah, I think to me there's two important roles that I, as a leader, have needed to have in my kind of in my my wheelhouse here. But one is an internal advocate, right? So find somebody in your company who believes in the use of data, who wants to see you succeed, and is highly engaged and will be your advocate, because you need somebody who can help you navigate though, in some cases political discussions, other cases breaking down barriers for you where you may be struggling. And I found that incredibly important for me when I joined US Bank, because being new, I didn't know the organization, and actually relied on one of our, she at the time was in the IT department doing implementations for Adobe Analytics, and ended up hiring her and bringing her on board. But I relied on her initially was to help me understand how things work. How does work get done? And so having somebody who can help you make those connections or stand in the way or help you break down those barriers that are standing in your way, that's important internally. But just as important is having a trusted advisor who's external, somebody who can be your guidance counselor and help you see things outside your four walls, because it's very easy to get trapped within your own company and miss out on opportunities because you're not thinking beyond your current, whether it's in your industry or your current domain functional area. And so for me, that early on was Eric Peterson. And he really helped me not only structure our approach for our strategy and how we were going to build out, but continue to push the boundaries and question, why we may not be making such a large change, and really push us to make those changes.
To make a bigger change.
And be louder and prouder versus, taking very small things. And since then, it's really broadened out, to, as you mentioned early on, the broader industry and leveraging others. Early on, this was 2010 or so, and digital analytics was just really kind of in the beginning stages, right? And we were pushing something and trying to build something at scale that there wasn't a lot of companies or organizations having experience with it, especially in an omni-channel retail way. And so having that experience now, my network has rounded out tremendously. And now I rely more on the people within companies who are doing this at scale now, because there's a lot more of that experience out there, and knowledge and expertise. And so I rely on people like you, or those in the industry and digital analytics industry, for continuing to help me evolve my thought process and learnings, to ensure that we're staying, at least being aware of what's coming down the road. And it you really need both internal and external.
Internal, I like that. One of the things I like about that is that it applies to everyone, no matter what stage they're at in their career. That applies to someone who just this week has started a brand new job in analytics, and this is their first experience, as much as it does to someone who's been in the field for a long time. Even Eric Peterson benefits from internal and external. He operates his own company, so internal is a different thing there, but I think it applies to everybody, internal and external, the benefit there. How do you, any thoughts on how to cultivate that in a COVID world, like during the pandemic? How does one establish relationships that they don't already have? Is it just as simple as sending them a message on Slack or Teams or whatever, and then getting together on Zoom, or is there something else to it?
For internal, it's whatever mechanisms you have within your organization. For us, it was Teams. And, at least internally with my team, we had stand-up meetings 3 times a week, where we would, just 15 minutes, talk about what current state is, what we're working on. We used Microsoft, a Kanban board to help us track our analytics work efforts and projects. And it enabled us to collaborate. And then we would bring in others as needed, right? When we had additional questions or maybe some barriers. But, and that's more internally. And, I like to use just IM or any type of messaging.
Just reach out. It probably doesn't matter the channel or mechanism. It's just most important to have that engagement.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's similarly, with networking externally. Obviously, LinkedIn is a good tool to find people. You begin following either hashtags or groups, and then following other people and just starting to learn from them. And then you can build relationships, you definitely have to go outside your comfort zone if you're not used to reaching out to people.
Yeah.
But I have found over the course of the last year, I have reconnected with more people, whether it's just peers in the space, in the analytics space, or friends or family, more so
Yeah.
than I ever did before. Because I think we're all in the same place, right? We're all
Right.
coming from working from home, wanting that human connection, and it has to come in a different form, virtually, obviously. But I think that, it's kind of reestablishing how to develop and build relationships
Right.
in a new way.
One thing that's worked for me there recently has been asking people, who have you been speaking with lately? Can you introduce me to someone who you've had an interesting conversation with? And sometimes that's in the course of doing something specific, some particular kind of work. And sometimes it's not. It's just just through a regular check-in, asking that question, and maybe that turns into a conversation with that person, or maybe it doesn't. But actively cultivating, meeting new people. Another way that I've met several people over the last year is through the DAA's anti-racism task force that I'm involved with. I've broadened my connections there, and we have a book club, and I've been part of the anti-racism book club. That's been really gratifying. So I think for me, one of the main concepts here is that these relationships don't just happen, especially in COVID when we're not walking down the same halls or sitting down at tables with each other at conferences. You have to take action to cultivate them, but they are definitely on offer.
Yeah, I think being intentional is critical in that, right? You have to, it's not just about reaching out to someone and saying, hey, tell me about, or help me understand this piece. It's relationships two-way street, right? And you have to your point, cultivate that. And I think the same thing goes for analysts, or people who want to get into the space, and either they're new to it or they're looking to grow their career, is to really take a look at where you're at. I've always said, and I heard this from, he was a recruiter, and this was a long time ago, but a recruiter had said this at a conference one time, that the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. It's greener where you nurture it, where you care for it, where you water it. And so before you decide to make any decision on changing a role, or jumping ship and going to a different organization, make sure you've actually took a step back and thought about the work that you're doing. Maybe there's a different way, right? You can approach it with a change in assignment, or there's opportunity. Again, this is where having that mentor or trusted advisor can help you see things differently than you can see yourself. You have blinders on typically when you're working in your company. And so helping you see some of that first before you make some of those big decisions, career changing decisions that may not be made for the right reason.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's so much opportunity in the analytics space these days. Companies now coming out of the pandemic with digital transformations that are accelerating, and the need for analytics, that there are great opportunities, and leveraging your networks to learn more about the company, about the work, before you even consider it, to make sure it's a right fit. I think that's key. And you're right about cultivating those relationships.
I completely agree. So much opportunity on this topic of building and leading an analytics capability. We've kind of been focusing on the leaders side of things, a little bit on the potentially the new analyst who's new to the field. Last question, I guess, is on the concept of people and I guess finding people. So if you're a leader and you're looking for people, or if you're a person who wants to be in this space and you're looking to be found, any tips and tricks that you've encountered on building a team?
Yeah, for me, when I'm looking at resources and looking to hire and to add to the team, it's important that I'm looking to fill a gap in experience or skill that I don't traditionally have. And so it's less about the direct experience for me, or the technical skill set, put it that way, and more about the innate curiosity that people can bring.
Mm.
And I think I had read this the other day about hiring for cultural fit versus cultural add.
Mhm.
And it really, to me, is, can someone come in and add? So, and that ad could be a totally different experience. They're coming in with something outside the industry, but has direct and relevant, can be added to the team and help push growth for the people as well as the capability is really important to me. So, having some of those traits of curiosity, asking the right questions, the desire to learn, and
Mm.
continually grow and evolve and change yourself. Perspectives change when you get exposed to new things, and I think
Right.
that's really important. While you're honing your technical skill sets, I mean, obviously that's never going to go away. How you can, if you can code or if you can visualize data, data translator obviously is a new kind of
Yeah.
role that's being talked about a lot. And so looking outside the traditional things, like that data translator role, to me is almost fits like with an account executive or account management role, where they're really bridging that gap between business and technology and can speak both languages and do so in a very articulate way and manage
In,
the relationship.
in an
Uh,
impactful way that's going to deliver business results.
yes. Yep.
Interesting. I really like this concept of cultural add. It's not necessarily about finding a puzzle piece to fit within your existing puzzle. It's sort of looking for people who will help you go into a new direction that you need to go to have broader impact on the business. The concept of asking questions and curiosity and willingness to learn, these are all skills that we can cultivate and competencies that we can cultivate no matter where we are in our career progression. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing those ideas. Lynn, thank you for joining us on Course 5 Compass Live. This has been a really insightful, inspiring conversation for me. I hope our audience has taken away some tactical opportunities as well, some ideas. Very much appreciate you joining me today, Lynn.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And best of luck to you where your paths take you. Thank you all to our audience, whether you're joining live or watching on the pre-recorded and posted version of this. Very much appreciate your taking the time to join us today. So have a great day. Thank you.